Should you talk or be quiet when driving for Uber and Lyft? I'm gonna give you a short answer because I hate YouTubers that ramble on, and then a longer answer. Short answer. If I had to pick one, if I was forced to pick one or the other, I gotta be honest, I'd lean towards being more quiet than being more talkative. So now let's get into the longer answer. Now, first off, I do want to mention right away, as you can imagine, kind of Captain Obvious, but I do have to mention it. The biggest thing is the conversational skill set, right? Just being able to read people. I remember when I first started driving for Uber and Lyft, my first ever ride, she was very talkative, which was great. And even after my third or fourth ride, I kind of got a quick gist when someone would get into the car and I could tell, like, okay, do they want to talk or not? Because as you can imagine, most people are on their phones now. And I have noticed over the years, which is really interesting. I don't know why. Maybe it's a phone thing, or maybe it's just how people have gotten used to Uber and Lyft. But I've noticed more people, way more than before, will get into a car, say, hey, how are you? Thanks for picking me up. They say kind of a quick, friendly banter, and then they immediately go to their phone. Maybe it's also because I think, too, back in the day, a lot of times the conversation would be like, hey, so what's it like driving for Uber and Lyft? What is this like? Do you enjoy it? Like, I feel like that it was so new that people were more interested in it, right? They were more talkative, kind of like say, like say it's your first time when you're 21 going to a bar, you might be more talkative with the bartender because you're like, oh my God, this is a whole new experience. But then once you get used to it, you're just like, hey, can I have a drink? And that's kind of it, right? I feel like now in this day and age, I feel like more people than not will get into the car and immediately go to their phone, which is why I suggest being quiet if I had to pick one. However, the biggest thing is the conversational skill set. Not only having a good conversation, but being able to read somebody. So one big technique I say right away, because I have had some drivers say, hey, Mark, I want to have conversations, but I can't tell if the person is talkative or not. My first technique is, are they looking outside the window or like looking kind of around, or are they on their phone? Typically, if they're on their phone, they're probably not in a talkative mood. They want to scroll on Instagram, whatever. The second thing is, are they talking to you, right? I don't want to be super direct, but I guess you could look at it as not necessarily speak when spoken to, because that's super aggressive advice, but similar. Like, right? Like, I feel like when someone would get in my car and I'd start driving, like, hey, how's your day going so far? And they'd be like, good. And then I'd wait. Do they continue that conversation? Sometimes people be like, oh, I'm doing good. And they look out the window and they just be doing this. Other times they say, oh, it's going good. How about yourself? Like, when did you start driving? Or they start asking me questions. I can tell, okay, they are in a talkative mood. I think this is important to kind of judge, right? Because what's very interesting, I just did a video talking about, how a lot of times drivers get 5 stars, even if they didn't talk. And it's interesting because I've gotten a lot of comments of people saying, hey, Mark, it's weird because I didn't talk at all. The person gave me 5 stars. They said I was an amazing driver. However, I've gotten some comments of people saying, hey, someone got in my car, we didn't talk, and then they gave me a 1 or 2 star rating saying, the driver didn't really talk that much. So it is kind of annoying, but I have noticed more likely than not, especially for me when driving, because I'm naturally a talkative person, I'm naturally like a social person, more likely than not, I'm probably going to get a bad rating if I try bringing them into a conversation rather than it being quiet and it being fine, right? Like, and what I mean by that is I think you're better off, like, say, being on the quieter side and letting the person take the lead than the other way around. More likely than not, people are more in the quieter side. However, I think a big thing is just having the conversational skill set, just being able to read people. And like I said, I usually like to, one, like I say, take the back end. Do they take the lead in the conversation? Do they ask me questions? The second thing is sometimes I'll throw out like a test question. And this is more what I like to call like a test or logistical question. So let's say we're driving, and let's say they say, hey, how's your day going so far? And I'm like, good, how about you? They say good. Let's say we stop talking. So about 5 or 10 seconds or 15 seconds or 20 seconds, dead silent. I might say a logistical question that's not trying to force the conversation, but asking them an important question. So I might say something like, oh, so just so you know, we'll be there in 10 minutes. Or just want to double check, you're going to 400 Vanilla Avenue, or something like that. So I'm not trying to pester them into a conversation, but I am kind of throwing out something and see how they respond. Sometimes people say, yeah, that's perfect, and they immediately go looking out the window again, or go back to their phone. And I'm like, okay, they definitely don't want to talk, no big deal. But other times, I'll be like, hey, we'll be there in 10 minutes, and they might be like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. The traffic's kind of bad right now. Usually it's about 5 minutes. And let's say they start talking more. Then I'm like, okay, they seem more in a conversational mood. And therefore, I should start talking more. So I think the biggest thing, like I said, is really feeling it out. But at the end of the day, like I said, if I had to give my advice to my beginning drivers, let's say I've even had people say, Mark, I'm not going to lie, I'm not the most social person, but I don't want to get a bad rating. I want to get a positive rating. I suggest be more on the quieter side and test them out, feel like if they want to talk or not, and then proceed from there.